Hey, this is Manav Misra, aka Codefinity, and in this video we're going to talk about the document object model, and we're going to learn a little bit about how to use array maps. I am using the developer tools here, and I'm in Firefox, but you can use Chrome, Edge, whatever you like. Mac, you hit Command-Option-I to open up the developer tools. And you can go here to this inspector tab and you can inspect. You can also click this icon and hover over things and see where they are in terms of the HTML. Works pretty similarly. I'm in Firefox. Works pretty similarly in the other browsers. Developer tools. You also have a couple of options here. I've got this zoomed in quite a bit, so it looks a little bit weird because I'm just focusing on this part here. We're going to be in the inspector tab and also the console tab. You also have the option of clicking on these, actually, no, right here on the settings, and, oh, here we go, setting. You can hit F1 also, and you can switch this to dark mode if you wanted to. Otherwise, generally speaking, all of the settings are fine the way that they are. All right, so there is how you get into the developer tools, and I just closed them. Command-Option-I on Mac, Control-Shift-I Windows or F12. Document object model. What that means is that we're going through the HTML. JavaScript doesn't know what the heck HTML is, so the browser, as part of its web API, which all that means, what is a web API? Well, the browser has a lot of built-in functionality, and we want to leverage that functionality. So it provides an API that allows us to interact with things just using JavaScript code, objects, methods, properties, things like that. So the document object model is one part of the web API, and it takes all of the HTML things, or more specifically nodes, and models them into an object, which we can then interact with in JavaScript. So if we go here to, we go here and look at like some images of the DOM, we can kind of get an idea of, actually here's one that's on Pinterest apparently, and you have like the document, and then you have all of these pieces of the document. So these are all of the different nodes in the document. Here's another one directly from MDN, and so we have an element, we have all of the elements, we have the text node, and they don't show an example, but even the attributes are part of the nodes. Now, this has nothing to do with Node.js, just to be clear. So again, here we have an element node. We have another element node. If we were to inspect this text here, this text by itself is considered a text node. And in addition, all of these have attributes that we can access. Okay, so that's all fine and good. What are we actually going to be doing? We're going to query this page, and we're going to be picking up on anything that has a class of star double underscore image. Then we're going to take that entire collection and look at all of the images in each one, and we're going to pull the src tag. And when we're done with that, we're going to end up with something like what? Well, if I say edit as a HTML, I can just like copy this one, for example, with Command-C. And what we're trying to do is build an array, so that's going to be brackets, and then I'm going to paste, inside of the array, inside of quotes, I'm going to paste that. So we want to build an array with all of the links, the sources for these images. That's what we're going for here. Okay, so of course I could just go through, and I think there's only 12 of them. I could just copy and paste them and call it good. That wouldn't really teach us too much about JavaScript and the DOM, though. So we are going to create an array of strings, with each string being the image src that's going to allow us to view that image. All right, so here we go. First things first, we're going to want to grab all of the elements that have a class of star image. Now, one other thing I should mention here is that we're using the console here in the dev tools, and this is known as a REPL, read, evaluate, print loop. And all that means is as soon as I start typing something, It's going to immediately read what it is that I'm doing. It's going to evaluate it, and right here in gray, it's going to try to return whatever value comes out of that. So as soon as I start typing document, it figures, oh, you want to know about the document. Well, this is some information about the document. So if I start typing document.query selector and I just say like p tag, well, it gives hey, look, hey, it's going to give us this first paragraph tag that's up here. It's not what we want, but this shows you what is a REPL. Read, evaluate, print, and then loop back around and await the next thing that I'm going to do. REPL. Okay, so now what is it that we actually want to do? Well, I'm going to assign this to a variable. I'm going to say const star images, or we'll just say stars for right. This will just be stars. So stars is going to be all of these divs, like the star images. Okay, so maybe we'll say star image divs. So we're going to say document.query selector all, actually. So we want all of them, not just one of them. Now you may be looking at this and saying, well, what happened to the print part of this? Well, when we are assigning this to a variable with const and a variable name, it's not going to actually create any or evaluate to any sort of value until that assignment is finished. So you'll see that in just a minute here. And so with query selector all, we want to grab anything. So we got to do this as a string, and we're going to be doing this by a class name. So if you think back to how you do this in CSS, with CSS classes, if you were selecting that, you would want to use the class name, and whatever you do in CSS, you can put inside of here. So query selector will just grab the first thing that matches. Query selector all will grab all of them, and that's what we want here. So if we hit enter, okay, nothing's really, there's no result immediately with this assignment, but if I start typing that, there you go. We can see that, okay, so you want me to evaluate what star image divs is, here you go. Read, evaluate, print, loop. So we succeeded in getting all of the div elements with the class of star image. Very good. So that's not quite what we want though. What we want to do now is take this node list. Again, this has nothing to do with Node.js, if you've heard of that. But it kind of looks like an array. It's not quite an array. So we're going to do the next thing, which is pretty simple. Turn this into an array. And I'm going to say, okay, this is going to be star images. And we're going to say array.from. Create a new array from something that is like an array. And now, if I look at star images, this is now a bona fide array in full color, too, at that. We have these 12 elements, and well, that's actually super cool, at least in Firefox. As you hover over it, it shows you which one you're on, so that's awesome. Anyway, this is an array. So why did we do that? Why did we do that? Well, it's so that we have access to the map method, array map. So what is map? Hopefully you've seen it before, but if you haven't, this example here is pretty straightforward. We are taking an array of numbers. So the way it works is we say, take this array and map over it, and here we give it a function or a callback function. This is written in arrow syntax, and in this case, so x, it'll keep going over every one of these elements. So x will be 1, and it's going to say 1 times 2 is 2. 4 becomes x, 4 times 2 is 8, all the way down. And the results of map, what it returns, is a new array, as we see here. We want to go inside of these star images, and we want to perform some sort of an action or a function or a callback function. And that callback function is going to go inside of these divs, and it's going to pull out the image, and specifically, it's going to pull out the SRC. Believe it or not, we're just about done here. Star. And now, we're going to put some braces in here. So this is a made-up name here. I could have just called this anything I want, but typically, If you have star images or whatever it is, a plural, that's like your array. And then in your callback, you can use the singular form to represent, hey, we're looking at each one of these things by itself. So take each star image and do what with it? Well, we're going to say return star image dot query selector. So query selector, that doesn't always have to be on the document. We can actually use that inside of any element object that we want. This works pretty much the same way. Remember that query selector all creates an entire collection. In this case, there's only one image, and I just want to pull it directly. I don't want to put it inside of a node list or whatever, so I'm just going to use query selector and grab that one image. And specifically, once we have that image, we just want to pull the src. And that's really it, and that's what I said. Actually, the return, all this really doesn't mean much. I think we can just take all of this out, including this brace here, and we can just roll with the implicit return. So when I do that, it says undefined, but then when I look for what our images, there we go. We have our 12 image URLs. So as a follow-up to this exercise, I would suggest that you try this out on your own. And this time, see if you can pull everybody's name. Actually, will be a little bit simpler, possibly, and pull out some other information. So this is something you can practice to better understand the DOM and to practice with map, because a lot of times that's what you're doing. You're going to grab a bunch of elements off of a page, and you're going to map over those elements and then pull some information out of them.